Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our illustrious speaker list with a very exciting session. I'm sure I introduce every session as exciting, but really we have peaked and we've stayed right up there from the very start of today and even the start of yesterday. This is day 2 and we continue with our high momentum. I'm going to now introduce our special guests for the next session and allow them to take over the stage. So we have Dr. Jonathan Doerr, partner of Antler. He's based here in Dubai. He's going to be gracing our stage. And Jeff Maggioncalda, who is the CEO of Coursera, flown in especially from San Francisco. Please, gentlemen, join us here on the stage. Give them a warm welcome. This is a little bit of an unusual session. I'm going to let the gentleman explain how we're going to break some of the regular rules of these types of sessions, because you have a very intriguing format. Who would like to explain to the audience what you're going to get up to?
Well, yeah, what we're going to do is we're basically going to take 2 different paths to explain how company formation has changed in a world of global AI. And we'll start with Jonathan here, talking about formation with founders, and then I'll talk from Coursera's perspective about what's happening with education and how talent and capital is going cross-border.
Fantastic, and I will now release you. My recommendation, let's keep mics really high up. There's no moderator on stage. This is a conversation, so you guys, please have the audience.
Thank you very much. Maybe a quick introduction. So Jonathan, my name, partner at Antler here in the Middle East. My journey, and Jeff will talk a bit about his journey, is an entrepreneurial journey. I'm originally from Germany, then kind of moved to Africa, spent 2 years in Nigeria in a company called Rocket Internet, built there the biggest e-commerce platform in Nigeria, and then became the co-CEO of Doerr, which is the biggest e-commerce platform in South Asia. So I lived in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal. We sold the business to Alibaba, spent some time in China and Singapore. And after that, I moved to Dubai, built a health tech company called Smile Neo, which I sold beginning of the year to an Indian company. So I was spending the last 5 years between UAE, Saudi, Qatar, and Bahrain. And now I'm not building companies anymore, I'm investing in companies now. So quick on Antler, we're an early stage VC capital company that invests in early stage companies. We're doing this with a 3-month program with individuals, so everyone that wants to start a business but hasn't found the co-founder yet can join us, and then in a cohort of 90 people, which we're running right now in Riyadh, you will be able to find your co-founder and then kind of get coaching through Antler and its venture partners, and then we invest the first check literally in the company. So very early on, $180,000 for 11%, and we're doing this between Dubai and Riyadh. So yeah, that's kind of entrepreneurial journey, but now on the investor side. And Jeff, I heard you have a very interesting journey on your side, and you actually raised some capital in your career.
Yeah, so I think that, I started in 1996. I became a CEO of a company called Financial Engines, which was a fintech company in the US that was actually founded by a Nobel Prize winner from Stanford, Bill Sharp. And he asked me to write the business plan. I was 27 years old and I had just graduated from the business school. And so it was actually a Series B, and it was a long time ago. But I think what will be fun is to talk a little bit about how these things change. So I started in 1996, 27, and raised a Series B, Series C, Series D, Series E, Series F, and then had an IPO in 2010, then took a couple years off. So I was the CEO of Financial Engines for 18 years, and then took a couple years off, and then joined Coursera in 2017 and raised a Series D, Series F, and then an IPO in March of 2021. And my daughter has started a company, and she tells me stories about the kinds of things that you guys are doing, which I think is really awesome, which is how do you create community in order for founders to get the kind of support and knowledge for company formation? Because people often say you need 3 basic things to start a company. You need talent, you need capital, and you need customers. I mean, if you have a great product and nobody has any money to buy it, that's a problem. And what we're seeing at Coursera, and I'll maybe flip it back to you, is that especially after the pandemic, the ability to create talent anywhere in the world is vastly easier than it was even 5 years ago. People realize that these courses in blockchain, in generative AI, in data, in global e-commerce, these courses are now available no matter where you are, no matter who you are. And we have just used AI to translate 4,000 courses into 7 languages. I'm actually in the region now talking about the Arabic translations, but by the end of the year, 4,000 courses on Coursera will be translated into 17 different languages. And this is radically changing the level of talent that exists globally across borders. And so that's one part of the equation, is the talent formation. The other is the ability to get employment opportunities, which is also going global, because many more jobs are now can be done remotely across borders. So I think the ability, if there are people who can provide capital across borders, knowledge and skills are being created much more equally across borders, and talent and teams can be built across borders, and customers increasingly can be in regions that are not necessarily the regions of the company. It creates a level of, I think, distribution of talent and opportunity that we haven't seen before. And I'd love to hear what you're seeing in terms of where is the talent and how hard is it to get capital and support to these new founders?
It's an interesting point you made, because our thesis as Antler, so we're a global VC, we have 27 locations, one of them is the Middle East that I'm heading. And what we believe when it comes to companies and startups, that we say talent is actually equally distributed around the world, but not the opportunity. So what we're actually giving and providing is the opportunity to meet your co-founder. So when you think about, and you said it, you need the 3 things, the talent, the capital, but also the customers, is that one of the hardest things when you want to start a business, that how do I find my co-founder? And that's where Antler starts. Most of the investment opportunities start when you have found a co-founder, you have started something in your garage or wherever, and then you say, now I want to raise money. And Antler kind of starts at day 0. So we say, there is talent, but how do they meet? So when you start a company, then you say, okay, who do I know from my university, or who are friends? And we believe that the area, or kind of the environment that you're looking, is actually relatively small. Because you need to find the perfect person that has the same vision than you, that has a complementary skill set, and that wants to start a business also today as you. And that's very, very hard. And that's where we come in. And that's where we kind of put 90 people. By the way, this year we had 3,000 applications for one cohort. So we picked the best 90 people, we put them physically in one room, and then we create that unfair advantage of, like, now you have 90 people, they're handpicked by Antler out of 3,000. They're all amazing. They all want to start a business today. And that's kind of we call it a little bit like a Tinder for startups. So from a talent perspective, that's where we put actually most of our work, is actually literally selecting these 90 people out of 3,000, because this kind of physical meeting your co-founder, we believe is very, very important. So that's the team, that's the talent. And as you said, like in the beginning, Antler had a little bit of master classes and these kind of things. We need this less and less, because obviously there is platforms like yours where there is education and you can train yourself. And AI is changing this quite a lot. So I would love to hear a little bit from you, like when you think about how your company looked like, let's say 5 years ago, and how it looks today or in the future, like how does your work kind of change? How does your work on creating these kind of courses, creating information, creating knowledge, how does AI change kind of your company and what you need to do as a company? And then the second question is like, I guess that's the learning part, like, are the AI courses now the most demanded thing on your platform?
Yeah, so Coursera is much different now than it was before the pandemic. I was pretty old-fashioned. I really wanted everybody to come to the office. I went to the office every day. And we're based in Mountain View, California, so we're literally like 1 mile from Google. and we're, I don't know, probably 5 miles from Apple and 3 miles from Facebook. They're up in Menlo Park. I mean, we're really, really close. And I hated it. What I liked about it is there were a lot of smart people who had a lot of experience and often had capital. I mean, a lot of the capital that creates businesses in the Bay Area comes from people who had equity and got a good exit, and then they basically give it to their friends. I mean, it's really, it's an unfair advantage. I just don't know if people realize how much of an advantage it has been. And I'll say unfair, but that, whatever it is. But so often people, in order to find opportunity, to find talent, to find expertise, to find capital, they would come to the Bay Area. And guess what? They come to the Bay Area, they get a job at Google, Facebook, Apple, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. And then the stock price goes up, or Coursera or Financial Engines, the stock price goes up, and a bunch of people make $1 million. Like, potentially 1,000 people in a company will make $1 million or more. Well, they go peel off, and they're like, hey, I've seen what success looks like. They now live in the Bay Area, and other people fly to the Bay Area because they want to get a piece of this. So it's been really a regional concentration that existed prior to the pandemic. But what we see happening in the Bay Area, and we see this at Coursera, is that the ability to learn these kinds of skills is now much more broadly distributed. And honestly, one of the things that it is doing is it's creating lots of new opportunities for business formation at much lower capital costs. It's going to be automating a tremendous amount of the cognitive processes that people perform. I mean, arguably, even software engineering and some pretty sophisticated technical skills, certain data science skills and things. But what it's not going to do, I don't think, is going to really substantially help this question of early team formation and kind of product market, like the stuff that's in the lean startup, which we did at Financial Engines and we're doing at Coursera, which is like, how do you find your customer? How do you develop your prototype and test it and get accurate feedback? And then how do you pivot? How do you change? As you learn what customers need and as you watch competitors, you've got to be agile and you've got to be quick. A lot of agility depends on the relationships among the people. And a major reason is, at Financial Engines, we went through 5 different business models before we finally found one that worked. I mean, it was hard. And we had 2 different layoffs. There were a lot of people who quit, and they said, I'm quitting because Jeff doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he's already tried 3 times. It didn't work. The guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'm out. It takes a lot of trust to succeed as a startup, and one of the reasons is you just don't know what success is going to look like. So I think, until I met you and I heard what you do, in the Bay Area, we have these founder circles and all these little private clubs where they all get together. But if you're in Riyadh or if you're in Dubai or you're in Bangladesh, how do you find these people? I mean, I'm really glad that you're doing it because that founding team is going to have to try a lot of different things before they get it right. And ideally, they're going to have investors who will measure them mostly on their rate of learning, not on whether they get it right the first time. And so the human relationships, especially when it comes to founding a company, are going to be, there will always be important, will never be, in my opinion, never be replaced by AI. And so that community and connection is a huge part of it. Because I think what Coursera is doing, we're going to make the skills pretty broadly available. And what remote work is doing is making it so you can build out your team across borders. Coursera today, we don't have anybody who has to come to an office. We have some offices, but people are all over the world. They're working all over the world, full-time employees at Coursera, and we have offices, but you don't have to come there. And we just found the ability to find talent is extraordinary if you don't have to come to an office. So just as a talent advantage, we are cross-border. But the hard part is the human relationships and the ability to move and change as you learn something. So I think that's a big part of what you're doing. And as companies in different regions become successful, there will be talent and capital and also customer bases that I think will allow for a much broader distribution of opportunity and wealth, frankly, which are very, very closely related. Opportunity and wealth are very closely related. I'd be interested to hear from you when people writing checks in Riyadh, people writing checks in Dubai, how have you seen that evolve over the last few years?
Yeah. Good question. So we saw in 2022 an increase of 50% in venture capital. So I think the Middle East is one of the regions after like all the regions that came, LATAM as one of the last, like this is the next region where things are changing. And we see three major reasons also why we kind of joined the region with Antler. Number one is we see an amazing pot, or like a pool of talents now. And this is a combination of talents that come out of the region. So we look mainly for former founders, former employees of startups. And of course, we had a few unicorns down the region, like with Kareem, etc. So this is, we call it the Kareem Mafia. So everyone that worked at Kareem is now starting a startup. So this is one of the things that we see in the region. There's more and more talent that would actually start a company. The second thing is, on the talent, is that, and that's amazing, we saw the first time that in the 3,000 application, we had a lot of people that actually come to the region. And the reason is that they see opportunities here that they might not see in other regions. We have a specific, for example, for specific areas in Web3, etc., where the regulation is quite nice in the region so that you can actually build something here that you might not be able to build in Europe. So talent is one of the major points. The second point is the capital we just talked about. So 50% increase in 2022 venture capital. Still relatively small, obviously, to like the US. But there's a high growth that we see in venture capital that would help us then when we write the first check, that the startups also obviously get their second and third check. And the last point is the market environment, especially what the governments actually, the programs that they set up, for example in Saudi, the 2030 vision, what they set up to actually enhance the region and to support innovation, support startups. We see this across the board in the UAE, in Saudi, and in the MENAP region. There's a lot that's done from the government perspective to actually really create a nice environment for actually these startups to grow. There's a lot of support on regulation. So for example, when we think about Tebi or Tamara as like the buy now, pay later services, they work very closely with the state banks together to make these kind of service and products happen. I saw that as well for myself when I built a health tech direct consumer startup, teeth straightening, like Smile Direct Club in the US that now got filed bankruptcy. And I worked very closely with the health authorities. So we see as a third factor really like the environment that is growing, the environment that is very, very supportive to go away from the kind of, let's say when we think about Abu Dhabi and Riyadh, going away from the oil economy towards more like an innovation environment. So the region is absolutely buzzing, and this is what also helps to attract talents to actually come here, which we never saw before. We have in the 90 people that we have in Riyadh, we have 34 nationalities, the US, Canada, Europe, and of course people that live already in the region. So yeah, these are the three main factors why we're here. Very exciting, and we hope to then create the next unicorns out of Antler. We have 8 minutes. Should we, you have now a good understanding on our backgrounds, a bit very different actually, I would say, companies, but there's a lot of things that we have in common, interestingly, and especially with your background. So you have a bit of an understanding, and what we wanted to do is also open up a little bit the stage. I know it's might be a bit surprising, but if you have questions to Jeff or to me, if you want to learn something about venture capital, early stage investment, or Coursera or Jeff's, a lot of like big history and background on raising a lot of capital, right, which is very important when you start a business. Yeah, happy to take some questions. Yeah, I don't know if we have a mic for the audience that is Yeah, there is someone with a mic. Here we had a lady in the first row.
Hi, so I'm Maria, I come from Norway. So in Norway, Antler is also there. But I kind of see that Antler is quite slow in Norway. Because like when we compare like in the region of Scandinavia, we compare like Sweden towards Norway, and we always see like Sweden going up, and Antler sort of like is trying to support in the region people. So my question is sort of, how do you see Scandinavia when it comes to like building unicorns? Because okay, everyone considers Sweden, but everyone forgets Norway.
So the question is, as Antler is also in Norway, Sweden, Finland, now also in Denmark, how I see Scandinavia?
I think especially Norway.
Yeah.
Especially Norway. So the background maybe is that the founder of Antler that started in Singapore is actually Norwegian, Magnus. Maybe that's where the question is coming from. I must say, me personally, I might look a bit Nordic, but I'm actually German, so my knowledge about the Nordics is limited, to be honest. But obviously, I know Antler very well, and what we see in the Nordics, we're raising now our second fund already for the Nordics. So we have individual funds across the world. So we have the MENAP fund is a $60 million fund. And the Nordic fund, they're raising now the second fund. And that's only possible because we were actually very successful with the first fund, especially in Norway. And it's very interesting, even though it's a very small population, we actually see very, very interesting businesses getting out of there. And they are very successful, obviously. Also, energy is a big topic, which there's some parallels between Norway and Saudi, maybe going away from oil, building something different. So there's actually quite some similarities. But what I hear, so as I said, my knowledge is a bit limited to Nordics, but in Antler, we're very happy with Norway, and we're raising now our second fund for the Nordics. It's one fund for all, now 4 countries actually.
Sorry, really 1 minute question. And how do you see the funding about from Sequoia? The funding from Sequoia.
The funding from Sequoia?
Yeah, Sequoia is one of the main VC capitals from Antler, actually.
So Sequoia is investing in a lot of companies that come out of our programs, right? So we're like, what we as Antler do, we invest the first check in our program. We also have a global fund, but that's regularly what we do. And then, of course, we're working with literally every VC in the region. Because our companies that we put the first check in need to raise external capital. So we work with every big VC, also angel investors, smaller VCs. We have good relationships to Sequoia and literally every VC in the world because we're in 27 locations now. So good relationship and always happy to have them in the cap table after we invested and wrote the first check. I mean, who's not happy to have Sequoia on the cap table? Next question, please. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff, Jonathan, thank you very much. Very interesting conversation here. My name is Andrew. We have a startup in the talent space, in the skills and talent space. So I guess I got 2 questions if I can get, for the price of one. Jeff, to yourself, how do you identify the need in the market for the skills that you're building the courses for? What is your technology or anything that you work with?
Yeah, that one, the question is, how do we find the skills that people are looking for? I mean, part of it's pretty basic. We see what people are searching for. They come to Coursera, they're like, blah, blah, blah. And if they don't find it, we're like, well, we better get that course. We also look at our competitors, frankly. We also look at web search. To some degree, we also look at what's happening on campuses, but honestly, the early indicators are what's happening on the consumer part of our business. What people are searching for and what people are enrolling in are good indications. And we find that if people are, like generative AI is super hot right now. It's super hot. And so, once you see something really doing well, it's a little bit like a movie franchise. You keep spinning off adjacencies and sequels and new characters and all that kind of stuff. But right now, yeah, Gen AI is like it's hotter than Bitcoin ever was. I mean, it's very hot right now. Second question.
Amazing, thank you. Second question to you, Jonathan. I guess from the other side, how do you identify those skills that you are requiring for, certain programs that you run in the founders? What is your structure to say, these are the skills we really want in our program?
Very good question. So we have applications and we are also actively scouting people. So for the 90 people that are started in Riyadh, we had 3,000 applications. So how do we get from 3,000 to 90? And then how do we get from 90 to actually 20, 25 people that get our investment? I make it very short because we don't have so much time. The first from 3,000 to 90 is always, is the person smart enough to figure shit out? That's what I say. And from 90 to 25, this is when we observe people over 3 months. And this is the person able to get shit done? So if you have someone that is smart, that figures everything out, and someone that is very fast in getting shit done, perfect founder.
Yeah, I would also say we get a lot of signals from employers. 3,500 companies hire Coursera to upskill their employees, and we have a good idea of what they're looking for. But having up close and personal view of what it's like to be a founder, and also hearing a lot of companies talk about what they're looking for now. To a large degree, the key with founders is capitalizing on change. I mean, the only reason opportunities exist is because certain needs haven't been met, or certain new capabilities exist to meet needs in a better way than they were before. But it's all about perceiving and acting upon an opportunity that arises because of change. I think that the value of entrepreneurship, the value of cognitive and emotional agility, a willingness to listen to what is needed in the marketplace, and an adaptability and a mindset of change and believing that you can figure shit out, I think that is so valuable, not just for founders. Every company is looking for employees who are able to, this is our value at Coursera, learn, change, grow. That is the key to entrepreneurship as a founder. It is increasingly becoming the most important attribute of almost every job role in the world, because the world is moving so fast that companies are looking for people who are always going to be learning and changing and growing. So we think it's great for Coursera, but it also creates just great opportunities for people who maybe didn't have the pedigree, people who didn't have the wealth and the capital. If you have that kind of grit, agility, and ability to get things done with other people, there's going to be great opportunities coming up. So we're very excited about that.
Thank you.
Cool. We have, time is over. I'm not sure if we can get one more.
Maybe one more.
One more question, maybe, before someone is kicking off stage. Whoever you pick.
Hi, it's good to know about Antler and Coursera.
Can you go closer to the microphone, please? Thank you very much.
Sorry. So we actually work for a venture studio. And we have also an AI-driven platform called SimC, which is a combination of Coursera and Antler, I would say, in terms of venture studio model. So what we do basically is in terms of we educate entrepreneurs and they self-generate business model canvas and set up, launch and scale reports. So I actually want to ask Jonathan is how do you validate ideas in terms of, because if you can see 90% of the startups fail, how do you gauge or how do you add value to that failure rate in terms of sustainability?
The 65% of the startups fail because their teams break up. Fun fact.
Yes.
So that's where Antler exactly tries to go against that. We say, instead of someone saying, okay, I met 3 people, I take this guy, we're giving you an opportunity to meet 90 people. The likelihood that you, within the 90 people, find someone that is good is way higher and fits to you. And then we're kind of literally testing you for 3 months, and we're like poking and seeing if the team actually is stable and survives. So for us, our investment decision after 3 months is a lot around team. It's not so much idea, because we believe that you need to pivot your business anyway 100 times before it becomes successful. We talked about it.
Yes.
So we focus so much on the team because we believe if we find great, smart people, this is what we put in the 90 people, it's really about this perfect mix of 2 or 3 founders, and we poke as much as we can. And if we believe this is a great team and they present to us after 3 months and the idea is like an 85% idea, we will still invest in the team because we know they will figure it out. We know they will pivot to make the right decision at the end of the day. So the key word here is team. That's the success rate.
And I'll just sort of final chime in. I've done like 9 rounds of $1 billion of financing, and many of those were dark days. Having investors that measure you not just on whether you hit your milestones, but on your rate of learning. Are you figuring it out? Does it still look like there's a big opportunity, and are you figuring out as a team? Having the right team is key, and part of the key of the team is your capital. And so having investors who will say, I'm going to measure you and reward you based on your rate of learning, because if you can figure this out, and you won't on the first try, you probably won't on the second try, you probably won't on the third try, but if your rate of progress is there and your investors understand that, then you end up succeeding instead of failing in many more cases. Thank you all very much for joining us.